Are you thinking about starting a podcast later in life, but aren't sure if it can actually go full time? Well, listen in to today's episode as I talk to Tony and Alisa DiLorenzo about their podcast, One Extraordinary Marriage. We talk about the journey they took, what it really took for them to go full time with this podcast, and what other things they're doing in their business. It's awesome. Hello, dreamers. Welcome to the Late Starters Club, giving you the inspiration, mindset, and tools you need to start something midlife and beyond. Remember, it's never too late to follow your dreams. Hey, late starters, it's your host, Andrea Vall, and I am here with Tony and Alisa DiLorenzo. I'm so excited. I met Tony at Podfest.
Yes.
And so we got to talking about your podcast, and I was like, and your mission and how you guys started. And I was like, I have got to have you guys on the show. This is so awesome. So welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Andrea. It's so great to be here with you, but more importantly, it was so great to meet you at Podfest.
Yeah. Super awesome. It was my first time there. I loved it and got to meet so many people doing amazing things, such as you guys. So just I'm just going to let people know what you do. You guys speak to a worldwide audience about sex, love, commitment, and you challenge listeners to make their relationship a priority. You've got and I'm so excited you guys sent me this. This is awesome. The 6 Pillars of Intimacy book that you have out. It's transformed a whole bunch of marriages. I mean, I don't know, probably
tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands.
Yes,
I know.
Since it first came out in November 21. Yes.
Yeah. And your podcast, One Extraordinary Marriage, has reached millions of people.
Yes.
So that is just amazing. So again, welcome. I'm super excited to have you guys here. So just tell us a little bit about how you got started in that journey to starting this kind of business. And did it start with the podcast? Did it start with an idea? What was the shift that happened to bring this all about?
Yeah.
So as you shared, the name of our podcast is One Extraordinary Marriage. And really everything started because Tony and I did not have an extraordinary marriage.
Mm-hmm.
We found ourselves at year 11. We've now been married 26 years, but at year 11, just really in this place where we were excellent roommates. We could get through the day-to-day handling the tasks of life together and of raising our 2 young children at the time, but we weren't actually doing this thing called marriage really well. And what happened was Tony is the big idea guy, and we were getting ready to lead a small group at our church, and he came to me one night as we were, getting ready for bed, and he's like, I think we should do a 60-day sex challenge. We just learned of these 2 other couples that had done these epic sex challenges.
Yeah.
And I don't even know, Andrea, if he actually finished the question or the proposition before I was like, absolutely not. Like, are you kidding me? We've got a 2 and a 5-year-old, and you want me to do what?
Yeah.
And we were at a place where we weren't even really having sex because there was so much disconnect in our marriage.
Right.
So I said no. I then got up out of bed, went to the bathroom, put on a fabulous avocado green face mask.
Yes, you did.
So that he would know that nothing was happening that night either, because I was just irritated. And then the next day, literally had a come to Jesus moment where, I had the thought, if I'm not willing to even try and engage with my husband, then my marriage is over. It's just a matter of time.
Right.
And that was the start of what would end up being a 60-day sex challenge. We completed 40 out of 60, but it was the following summer when we shared our story that people started asking us, well, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. And literally Alisa and I at this point in time, we're like, we're good. What do you mean what's next?
Marriage is good.
Our marriage is good. We're going to continue to grow. What has now become the 6 Pillars of Intimacy started then.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were building on those pillars. We were strengthening them. But it just kept coming up. People were like, oh, man, what you did was amazing. When are you going to teach more? When are you going to share more? And this was back 13 years ago now, 2009, when blogging was big.
Yeah.
We stepped into blogging. We started writing, and we didn't like it. We were actually getting more mad at each other.
There's a lot of frustration around blogging.
Than what it was worth. And people began to read in between the lines. And so it was really hard to sort of share what was really on our heart, how we were feeling, the emotions that were coming through.
Right.
And we had hired a business coach just to sort of help us get this thing sort of moving. And he just mentioned that there's this thing called podcasting. And I was like, well, what's that? He goes, you can talk. It's like a radio show. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. That would be awesome. And so he's like, hey, I can hook you up with a guy who can help you get it all set up. So I was like, Alisa, we're doing this. So I bought all the equipment. I don't know.
Again, with the ideas. We're gonna do this.
I'm like, I'll buy all the equipment. I'll hire this guy to get us up. Back then it was iTunes and get the RSS feed and the cover art. It was hard back then. 13 years ago, it was hard to get this stuff together.
Yeah.
And then it all sat there for about 3 months.
Until I got irritated and was like, is this the most expensive paperweight that we bought? Because it literally, it's so funny that it sat right to the door. This is all the equipment, all the podcast equipment. It was in a big box, and he got it, and it came in the front door. It got placed by the door to the garage, and it didn't move for 3 months. So we had to walk around it. We had to step over it. You would came inside, and finally, I was just like, you have to do something with this box. You have. I'm irritated, and so a very, very cold for San Diego January night, we sat down, January of 2010. Yeah.
Yep.
Like what year are we on? 2010, and recorded our first podcast episode.
Yep. And took many takes. And that's where it all started with the idea that we wanted to impact one marriage. Mm-hmm. And we just got behind our microphones, not knowing if anybody would ever hear it, not knowing if anybody would listen, but we had a desire to impact marriages so that other people in marriages didn't feel like they were alone.
Yeah. Yeah, that is awesome. And now you have you have like several million downloads, or what's your yearly download? You have like
so last year we did just under 2.7 million downloads.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And
it is.
You probably had no idea when you were starting it back then that it would now be a full-time business for both of you.
No.
Right?
Oh, no. This was very much hobby-based, hobby-driven, that we wanted to just impart what wasn't out there in the market. We felt like where we were, the stage of life we were in, the books and those that were sharing around marriage didn't really address a lot of the issues that were really going on. Mm-hmm. And so it was more of I was running another business. I had another full-time business. Alisa was full-time mom and she was doing some direct sales companies at that time. Mm-hmm. And we were like, we just want to talk about it. We're just going to go week by week. What's happening? Yeah. And lo and behold, back then too, we didn't have
numbers.
We didn't have download numbers. There weren't back ends where it showed you any of this data or anything. And so we just kept talking, and it just grew. People started to find us in North Carolina, Alaska, Africa. People were emailing us, and we're like, oh, wow, people are listening. And so we just continued to move forward and just made it our weekly ritual. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it really was a healing for our own marriage because we grew so much through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is awesome. And then the book came out much later than the book. And actually, I'm going to just give another little plug for the book. You guys, you have to read this. Anyone has to read. Anyone who likes to be in relationships with humans should read this.
We'll just take that.
Yes,
that covers it all.
I know, and it's just look at how far I've read in like one day. It's like I just was plowing through it. It's really, really good. So then the book came out like a lot later. I mean, well, not a lot later, but 10 years later after you started, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you started. When did it start becoming like really serious business? What was the shift there?
So this is actually, The 6 Pillars of Intimacy is actually our 6th book.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But it is the one that has been the culmination
of all those years of lessons learned, of conversations had, of coaching sessions and whatnot. And it was probably about 5 or 6 years in. Mm-hmm. And I remember Tony had his other business, and we were funding One Extraordinary Marriage through savings, through the income from that business. And I remember he called me one day, and a little bit of frustration. And he said, this is either going to make money or we're going to close it down.
And
and the reason that was, Andrea, is because I was running my other business, which was a solopreneur business.
Right.
My former life, I did what was called paintless dent repair, where you get hailstorms, you understand hail. I did a hailstorm at DIA many years ago. Man, we're talking probably 20 something years ago.
Yeah.
I did a hail, my company that was out there. We did a bunch of hail cars. But that was my business. And so I was in it every day. And One Extraordinary Marriage was growing. There was more demand. There were people. We had hired an assistant and a customer support person. There are a lot more calls coming from Alisa, like, this is going on, that's going on. This person needs this person needs that. And it just got to a point where I was like, I can't do both well.
Right.
I just can't. One is out in the field. One is here at home. And so I was doing a lot of stuff early in the morning. I'd wake up before the family would wake up. I would work for a couple hours. I would see the kids off. I would rush. I would give her a kiss and be like, I'm gone. I'm out 8 hours a day. And then I'd come home, hang out with the family, eat dinner. And then I'd spend another 2 or 3 hours and go to bed at midnight or something.
Wow.
And I was just getting burned out. And so it just came to a point where it's like, if One Extraordinary Marriage is going to be what we really believe it is and the call that it has, then we need to transition this thing. And by that time we had a couple of books, but as any new author or anybody who's new into something, you create something, you publish something, and you think you're going to sell thousands upon thousands, and you sell like 50.
Yeah. So build the dreams. Build it and they will come. Until you build it and they don't come.
Right. And you try to market it, and you try to do Facebook ads, or you try to do this, or you try to do that, and it doesn't work. So that was just that hard conversation about 5-6 years in, just going like, if it's going to do something, then we really need to start making something happen.
Right. Right. You need to get serious. And, I think that's definitely what it takes, right? You need to be super intentional about what are the programs look like? What are we offering? How are we getting people in, and, and what writing copy so that people actually buy the things or whatever, all that stuff. It takes so much time. So yeah, that's awesome. And then, so you started more with, so you've got like coaching, you've got retreats, right? You've got like, what other things are you guys doing? Oh, membership, right? Do you have membership?
Books,
no.
Courses,
well,
coaching.
we have our Position Post magazine, which is, I would consider it a continuity, because we have either a monthly option or a yearly option.
Right.
So yeah, we have different ways to, we also have our e-commerce site where we sell all our books, other products. We do some drop ship there. So we have a number of different things that we have set up over the years to, help the one family go wherever they're at. They can step in. They can go, okay, well, I need lube. All right, well, buy some lube. Other people are like, I need coaching. Okay.
Yep.
Apply for coaching.
Yep. I need coaching to get to the lube. We need to
strengthen that sexual intimacy pillar. That's how we're going to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's so awesome. I love that you guys have been, approached it in that way from a really analytical standpoint on like, what can you offer? Because I think sometimes people get in a space of like, just one offer, one way of monetizing. And when you can monetize in lots of different ways, I think it's really helpful to a sustainable business for sure. So why don't you guys share some of the obstacles? Obviously there's been obstacles in just like, along the way, but what are some of your favorite obstacles that you've run up against?
Favorite obstacles. Wow. I like that question. I like that one.
I guess on one level, I'm kind of married to my favorite obstacle.
Well, I love you too, honey.
But it's a really interesting dynamic when you work with your spouse.
Well, let's even share with Andrea how we figured out to get to a place right now where that was an obstacle.
It was a huge obstacle.
How do we figure out how to work together?
Right.
Well,
right.
And a big challenge was when we first started. We like everything. When you first start a business, everything needs to be done, right?
Right.
And so you're doing different things, and everybody's trying to, like we were blogging and we were writing, and then we were trying to podcast, and who's writing the ideas for the podcast, who's writing books, what does that look like? What's a course? Who's going to buy the course? Right. And we had really gotten into this place where it was just kind of muddled, and it was just sort of like, well, here's what needs to get done, and somebody's going to do it. And
neither would do it.
Someone has to do it. someone. That
We'd have these
mysterious
amazing
someone.
meetings, and then nothing would get
done.
done.
Someone wouldn't show up to the meetings, right? That mysterious, invisible someone.
Yes. Oh,
And what we learned and what we had to really work through, and this is why I say I'm married to my biggest obstacle, is because we didn't know when we first got started, and we didn't really spend a lot of time, and this was a downfall for us, of really evaluating where our strengths and our passions were. That was something. Those were conversations we had later on after we had started One Extraordinary Marriage. And I would say to anyone that is starting, like, evaluate for yourself and on your team what the strengths and the passions are. If we had jumped into that sooner, I think some of our early tension might have dissipated. And even when you're starting something, you don't know, but as you start, it starts to evolve. And it wasn't until we really started to get into our individual lanes. For example, I am the coach here at One Extraordinary Marriage. It is a gifting that I know I have. I've seen, crazy miracles and transformations in my couples. Tony has two statements when it comes to coaching. His coaching can be boiled down to start doing X, stop doing Y. Like, it's either going to follow you or you can't. I'm a little more nuanced.
Yeah.
Right. And when we discovered that, because we tried coaching together, we discovered that that's not, like, he's actually incredibly effective as a coach, but it's not his gifting. It's not his passion.
Right.
And so when I took that on entirely, it really started to elevate what was happening with coaching in our business.
Yeah.
And I think with the tech stuff, he may not always like the tech stuff, but he's much better at it than I am.
I do enjoy it. And I would say, like, some of my favorite obstacles have been around the tech stuff.
Right.
We from, like, starting out on Aweber to now being on ConvertKit and using, different platforms like Entreport and ClickFunnels and, different ones. And how do we get that set up so that it works smoothly, not for just us internally, but for the one family, so that they can buy something, they can get it, they can get access to it.
Right.
And that, to me, has been fun. It definitely causes some stress when you are moving everything from one platform to the next and you're trying to figure out how it all integrates. But it's finding good people that you can bring around you to check and set it all up. So those have been some favorite obstacles.
I actually thought of another one.
What's another one? Let's go.
I love it.
This is a great question because we've
never been asked this question before. But I think one of the biggest obstacles too for us is that Tony is a visionary. And it's an obstacle and an opportunity for growth. Tony is total visionary. He's like, we're just going to go and we're going to end up here. And you know what? We'll build the plane as we're flying.
We're going to do it. Like, I'm like, let's go do it.
I am details and processes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm actually probably his biggest obstacle.
Yeah.
See?
Because I will bring the vision. I will bring the dream. And Alisa, and I really do believe it's because of how she works so well with her coaching clients, she sees the little details. She catches the nuances. She catches the movement of the hand or the head or the sigh. She catches all of that. And within my dreams and visions, she's catching all of those, where I'm just like, no, we're going to do a marriage getaway in Cancun.
Yeah.
But
how about this? And how about this? And how about this? And I'm like, it's okay. We're going to get to Cancun. We're going to take a couple of months.
So it's good to have both of those within an organization.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes
there's a little bit of a tug of war at times.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it sounds like that really complements each other in certain ways. But I did have a business partner where we launched a course together, and it was sort of a similar type of thing where I was like, woo, the sales page is up, I'm selling it. She's like, wait, what? You know?
That happens.
Yeah.
And then I would say, even for those who are starting something and you are looking to bring on a partner, these aren't uncommon situations. You don't have to be married to be in that. Like, you could have contractors or employees where these are the same things that are going on, and having to be clear what each role is. And if you're starting something, who is taking on what roles and who's getting what tasks done is going to allow your organization to move forward.
Right. Yeah, no, it's so true. It's so true. Just understanding, like you said, who's doing what, how's it all gonna work? Who's the who's the QA person who's going to check all the. So that is so great. So I want to talk a little bit more about your book and the whole idea of the 6 pillars, because I think it's just like super, it was kind of eye-opening to me, the way it's all just kind of grouped into these very foundational pillars that go way deeper than you might think. You might think, oh yeah, let's talk about finances. But the way you talk about it in this chapter is a whole different idea, or whole different ways to kind of investigate that. So talk about a little bit about your methods.
Well, the idea of, we've been talking about intimacy literally from the very beginning.
Yes.
Our very first episode is called 60 Days of Sex. And so that was an episode where we're talking all about sexual intimacy. We didn't have a name for it back then. But what we realized when we did that 60-day challenge was that, one, you can't have sex 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So building intimacy in a marriage is really looking at all of the different aspects that comprise a marriage. And
I just want to step in real quick though. When we say intimacy, we mean closeness and connection.
Which is what I was just going to say.
Okay, there you go. You're already on it.
You guys are good.
Yeah, we're there. But it's just making sure that the listener understands that intimacy is closeness and connection. That doesn't mean intimacy isn't just sex.
Right.
And that's what we've learned over the years.
And that really became, that's a cornerstone principle that we share in the book, is how can you look at these different areas, the 6 pillars, and say, what can I do and what can we do to create intimacy, to create that closeness and connection, in our emotional intimacy, how we communicate, in our physical intimacy, the non-sexual touches. You mentioned financial intimacy. So yes, building closeness and connection when it comes to your money and all the things that are financial, when it comes to your spiritual intimacy and shared faith practices, when it comes to recreational intimacy, the fun things that you do together. And then finally, your sexual intimacy, how the two of you engage sexually. And that was really, as I've coached over the last 10 years, as we've received countless emails and direct messages, we were seeing that there were these patterns where couples were struggling with thinking there was a problem in their marriage, but they didn't have a vocabulary. They didn't have the words to say, something's going on with us, but I don't know how to fix it. Like it's sort of like this. We struggle to communicate. And what we found in launching this book is, as couples read it, as they develop this vocabulary, as they can call out these 6 different pillars, it's an empowerment tool to really allow them to take action in their marriage.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is so great. And you guys on your podcast, you guys don't hold back. You talk about everything.
Yes, we do. And it comes from a place when we started the podcast all those years ago. One of our biggest tenets was be open, honest, and transparent. We wanted that to be a core value of what the show was going to be. And it's been tough at times. It's been liberating at times. At the end of the day, I think it's what's allowed us to speak into so many marriages, because we're not scared to talk about lube and how we're going to use it. We're not scared to talk about these touchy topics, even around finances. Like some people don't even want to like shared or separate accounts, or even talking about like, do we get a will? Should we have a trust? Well, because now we got to think of end of life. And I don't want to deal with that because I'm 30 years old. And yet all of us are going to eventually die. And how are we going to protect what we have and our families? And so talking about touchy topics has been truly a blessing for us. And it's allowed us just to share with one another, even during times of the week when we were just running around. It's our time to just get behind our microphones and just tell each other what's going on in our own lives.
Yeah, that's awesome. People just listen in and so that's so great. So just I'd love to hear from you on, you guys were starting podcasting before it was really a little bit more mainstream than it is now. Who have been some of your greatest teachers, influencers along this journey that have helped you grow to where you're at?
With the podcast?
Yeah, with the business, with the podcast, all of that.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, it's interesting because we actually just had a meeting with one of our coaches earlier today. Dan Miller.
Oh, yeah.
It's the Work You Love. Tony you met Dan, what, 20 some years ago?
Yeah.
20 plus years ago?
21.
I don't know, a long time. And Dan has kind of been this constant in our lives, whether through, direct coaching or just being able to observe what he's done and what he does well in terms of creating community, coaching programs, whatnot. And so for me, just having that observational, but also having the one-on-one coaching opportunities with him, he's been very instrumental in creating a lot of shifts in what we do at One Extraordinary Marriage, just from a business standpoint.
Yeah. I would say podcast wise, I'll do a podcast and then another coaching program that we've done. Podcast wise, I love Mixergy. It's just one of those that I have honestly listened to, I think, for 10 years now. and I can walk away and listen to a bunch of other podcasts. And then I always come back to listening to Andrew and what he's done over there at Mixergy. And I've always just appreciated it. I think it's because a lot of the businesses he's talking to are in the tech world, which is not where we are, but I learn from them.
Sure.
And they're massive VC companies, but he also talks to smaller folks as well. So I've always just enjoyed his style of interviewing because on the One Extraordinary Marriage Show, we don't do any interviews. It's just Alisa and I.
Yeah.
I just have always found it really cool and just have enjoyed it. And then more recently, self-publishing has been the company we've worked with and the coaches we've worked with to help us with the 6 pillars of intimacy. And we have a new book coming out mid this year that they're helping us with that one as well. And I have just loved Chandler Bolt, who leads that organization with just so much just like zest and just excitement about what you can be as a self-publisher, where so many years ago when we released our first book, nobody really knew what that was as well. And we were on KDP very early on, and I wish I would have really stuck in that because I think our Amazon platform would be much larger at this point. But I love how he just champions self-publishers and who are willing to just go out there and go, I'm not going to let anybody tell me no. I'm not going to wait for a traditional publisher to tell me I'm good enough. I'm going to get it out there and I'm going to get it into the world. So I've appreciated Chandler and his team.
Yeah.
And I've got another podcaster that's been really influential. And this is just someone I discovered over the last year. I've known about him for years, but the podcast is called I Will Teach You to Be Rich.
Yeah.
And I am a very auditory learner. And so the way he coaches and the questions that he asks, I have already found myself just incorporating those just really through osmosis. I feel like, I've listened. It's the only podcast that I've ever binged the entire catalog of. He's got like 80 shows. I binged.
Wow.
Catalog. And that's saying a lot for me because I'm like, I'll just kind of dabble into a podcast, but he's so good at asking great questions.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's been a while since I've listened to that podcast. So now I'm going to circle back to it because I'm like, oh God. Yeah.
Alisa's always telling me, she's like, oh my gosh, this couple, like, this is what's going on. I'm like, wow. For
us, it's also all about, like, I get to listen to another couple deal with financial intimacy. Yeah. And that's one of the 6 pillars. And so I just love somebody that just digs into that really strongly. And so it's always fun to just
hear that.
Be a fly on the wall.
Yeah. That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, this has been so fun. This time always like just flies by so much. And I want to make sure that we get enough time to, hear where people can find you and all that stuff. But I always like to ask the, inspirational saying or something quote that inspires you, and I know you guys have 2, which I'm excited about.
All right, well, I'll go first, and this is one that we post from time to time up on our Instagram, and it says, "If her bra and her panties match, it wasn't you who decided to have sex."
I love that.
Float it out there.
Great. So great.
From Alisa. And mine is be intentional and take action. And it's something that we have shared. It's another one of our core values. Be intentional, no matter if it's in your marriage, in your business, wherever it may be, parenting, you got to be intentional and then you got to take action, because without action, we're just going to sit in the same spot. And it's what Alisa and I have done many a times over year after year.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's great. And I just love what you guys are doing out in the world there, helping marriages, helping relationships, helping people at all different stages too. It's not, just getting into marriage, just being married for 50 years, all that, just in relationships in general. And like I said, I do seriously think that every single person should read this book
Yes.
because I think it can just help in your relationships with other people and anything. So I love it. Love it.
Yeah.
So where can people find you, find your podcast? I know you've got oneextraordinarymarriage.com. One is spelled out. So we'll have the link there in the show notes. And anyway, else that's probably the hub, right?
Yeah, that is. You know what? How about we let everybody go for a free quiz on the 6 pillars of intimacy? Find your strongest pillar. Find out what your strongest pillar is. You can go to oneextraordinarymarriage.com/free quiz.
Nice.
Take the quiz, and it'll just, at the end, it's just going to spit out and it's going to tell you what's your strongest pillar. And we're all about from strength to strength. Like, let's start where you're strong. You can always find out which one has cracks in it, but you can also build that one up. So go to oneextraordinarymarriage.com/free quiz.
That is awesome. And we'll have those links in the show notes. But yeah, guys, just go listen to their podcast, follow them, get the book. It's just going to improve your life right there. So
there you go.
So thank you guys so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you, Andrea.
Our pleasure.
Bye, everyone. Hope that was helpful, and make sure you grab the free guide, Top Tools for Late Starters, on the website at latestartersclub.com. And let's turn dreaming into doing.